Hi, thank you for clicking on my channel. Today we are going to go on a neighborhood walking tour. It's actually one of my favorite neighborhoods in all of LA, and it's so full of some really great old Hollywood stories because before Beverly Hills was even a thing, before it was really even on the map, everyone in show business lived in this neighborhood. So let's go discover Whitley Heights and some surrounding areas. All right, here's a good general view of Whitley Heights and the 101 freeway, which actually destroyed a bunch of homes and properties when this extension of it was built in 1950, but we're actually going to talk more about that later in the tour. We're in the center of Hollywood on Cahuenga Boulevard, looking south toward Hollywood Boulevard, the Walk of Fame, Sunset Boulevard, all the fun jazzy stuff, and north through the underpass is the Cahuenga Pass, which pretty much connects Los Angeles to the San Fernando Valley. All right, before we head west down Franklin Avenue, which is the southern border of Whitley Heights, I wanted to show you this little landmark popping out. All right, off we go. First up is the boring side of this Spanish-style apartment building. In 1928, film director Cecil B. Mille commissioned a husband and wife architect duo to build it for basically New York actors to stay in while they were in LA for work. Nowadays, courtyard apartments are very synonymous with LA, but this was actually one of the very first ones, and I really wish we could go in because behind that wall there's a beautiful fountain, handmade tiles, and the apartments have those high beam ceilings, and my favorite thing ever, those large concrete fireplaces. DeMille picked the corner of Franklin and Grace because it's right at the bottom of Whitley Heights, and it would be convenient for all of the out-of-towners to network and hobnob, wink wink, with the rich and famous who lived right up the hill. Tons and tons and tons of showbiz people have lived in this building over the years, including 1930s movie star Anne Harding, who paid a whopping $500 a month back in 1928. Which was really a lot of money back then. Perhaps the most well-known, and definitely to me the most fascinating tenant, lived here during the 1960s. Legendary performer, singer, and actor Zevon, who oddly enough would die just a few blocks away at a Hollywood Boulevard hotel in 1988. Kent Warner, another tenant, was an avid movie memorabilia collector, and when he died in the AIDS epidemic in 1984, the building's owner accidentally threw out a box of his containing James Dean's boots from Rebel Without a Cause and Marlon Brando's leather jacket from The Wild One.
Cool building. I should have looked in this area. What's the rent for a place like this?
I don't know.
Today, each unit sells for pretty close to $1 million, but come on, Dylan McDermott, you should know this. You starred in a 90s rom-com whose fictional storyline centered around the building. Dylan did a third project that used the building. Although he didn't have any scenes here, Ryan Murphy's Hollywood on Netflix used the place as Anna May Wong's Hollywood apartment. It was also Chuck's place in the NBC sitcom Chuck. Although it's not technically Whitley Heights, while we're here, I want to walk down to the end of Grace Avenue and show you what used to be the Hollywood Hawaiian Hotel. Dates back to the 1930s, and in the 50s it became pretty popular amongst television writers and comedians. But in the 60s and 70s it became quite a haven for rock and roll's elite. Pink Floyd, Led Zeppelin, and the original lineup of what would eventually become my all-time favorite band, Fleetwood Mac, all stayed here. One of those early television writers was pervert Woody Allen. He was actually living here during his very first LA gig, writing for the Colgate Variety Hour. He was 20, and surprise, surprise, he had a 16-year-old girlfriend back in New York, and he flew her out here, hired a rabbi, and married her inside the hotel. I've walked by this place so many times, and I've always wanted to go inside, and I can't help but feel that that door propped open is our invitation to do so. It's now called the Princess Grace Apartments, named after the street it's on, nothing to do with Princess Grace herself, and I actually didn't expect it to look so nice in here. I really can't believe I'm in here. I have had this postcard from when it was the Hollywood Hawaiian Hotel, and not only is the pool still here, but it looks the exact same. So fun. Exactly 30 years ago, almost to the date, the original Fleetwood Mac lineup were on tour, staying here during their LA gig when guitarist Jeremy Spencer told roommate Mick Fleetwood that he was running down to Hollywood Boulevard to grab a newspaper, but he never returned. The band canceled their gig at the Whiskey A Go-Go, and after a 5-day frantic search, they found Jeremy downtown in a warehouse, his head shaved, now identifying as a member of the Children of God cult. The band pleaded with him, but that was it. He never returned to Fleetwood Mac. Rose McGowan and Joaquin and River Phoenix were raised in the cult. Rose wrote about leaving them in her book, and River told Details magazine in 1991 that the cult was ruining people's lives. To this day, Jeremy Spencer is still a member and continues to make his own music. Warren Zevon is a musician that you don't really hear much about anymore. Despite being totally revered by other artists and winning 2 posthumous Grammys after he died in 2003, he never really reached the level that he should have.
I was staring in my empty coffee cup. And if California slides into the ocean, like the mystics and statistics say it will, I predict this motel will be standing until I pay my bill. I was sitting in the Hollywood Hawaiian Hotel. I was listening to the air conditioner hum. It went
Alright, we're back at Franklin, and although Grace is one way to enter Whitley Heights, I want to show you some more stuff down here, so we're actually going to end the tour by coming down this way much later on. In fact, to me, the only way to enter Whitley Heights is up this beautifully dramatic hill, which is actually Whitley Avenue, but there are a few buildings on Whitley between Franklin and Hollywood Boulevard that we're going to check out. First up is the Fleur de Lis apartment building, built in 1930, which originally had a women-only rule, housing actresses. It was also seen in a 1954 movie called Shield from Murder. If you're into horror movies, such as Insidious 2, which was shot here, check out my horror movie tour. It's on YouTube and in my Instagram highlights. That's Hollywood Boulevard at the end of Whitley, just minutes from the Chinese Theater, the Kodak Theater, the Walk of Fame, all that fun stuff. Right next door are the Fontenoy apartments, which opened in 1929. Now, there are 13 floors, but only 4 units per floor, and what I love about that is it gives each unit these really great corner window views. Former residents of the Fontenoy include Johnny Depp, Nicolas Cage, and Crispin Glover, who was rumored to live in the penthouse with a bunch of reptiles and a bunch of bats, which I 100% believe. A few doors down are the La Leyenda apartments, built in 1927, and once home to Oscar winners Bing Crosby and Mary Astor, who lived here for a short period after her director husband Kenneth Hawks, Howard's brother, was killed in a plane crash shooting a scene for a film. Anthony Kiedis and Flea from the Red Hot Chili Peppers both lived here at one point, and if you watched Hollywood on Netflix, you might recall that one of the main characters, Jack Costello, lived here. Before we begin our ascent into the Heights, we're going to walk down Franklin Avenue so that I can show you one more building. Really just an Art Deco masterpiece. It was built in 1935 at a cost of $1 million. And could you imagine? And at one point, it was the tallest building in Hollywood, and I think it actually still might be. Today, the Montecito apartments are low-income housing for seniors, but man, oh man, back in the day, it had quite an incredible roster of tenants.
When we were living in squalor, wasn't it heaven? Back when we used to get on it 4 out of 7. Now even though that was a time I hated from day one. Eventually terrible memories turn into great ones. So if they call you, embrace them.
While Sal Mineo's career was about to come to an end, he was roommates here with a young actor whose career was about to take off. Not only were Sal and Don Johnson roommates, but the two actors shared a stage in a very controversial play here in LA.
You know, for a guy who claims he doesn't go in that direction, it looks like to me you walk the path hot and heavy.
Are you trying to prove something, wise guy?
Nope. I don't have to. You prove the point every time you open your mouth. It snaps shut on what you are.
Don't you ever get the idea that I'm a pansy punker?
Watch your words there, Rocky. Because I'm nobody's punker these days, remember?
Franklin runs into Highland Avenue down there, which is our western border of Whitley Heights, and we'll see a little bit more of that later on in the tour. All right, back on Whitley, about to climb into the hill, as it used to be called. Now, as Whitley Heights was growing, Hollywood was transitioning from silent films to talkies, as they were once called. And a lot of silent film stars actually lost their careers when audiences just didn't like their voices. I mean, it's really, really silly to think about today, but fans literally rejected their idols when they heard some of their voices for the first time. And that happened to child star turned Broadway star turned film star Viola Dana. It's a sad metaphor, but while most of the careers on the streets above hers were soaring, hers came to a flat-out end when she quit show business in 1930 and moved into the Ojai apartments. Was truly a pioneer in the world of celebrities. Not only did she start her career at the very beginning of the entire film industry, but she was one of the first actresses to endorse cosmetics. In fact, she was one of Maybelline's very first models. She also experienced a lot of tragic loss, though. Her first husband was a film director who died in the 1918 flu pandemic, and her boyfriend after that was a budding film star himself. He was a daredevil aerialist who died shooting a film that Viola was on set for.
making a picture for Fox. They were starring him in it, and he was doing some night flying, tailspin. And he said to the director, he said, now when I get down to the level of the oil wells, take the lights off me, the sunlight arcs. Take those lights off me, and I'll know where I am. I can come out of it. And he went into the tailspin, and they never took the lights off him. And of course, he into an oil sump. There was practically nothing left of him because those jennies, you know, they're very fragile. Somebody picked me up I started to run for the plane, and somebody said, grab her and take her home. I guess I was just kind of crazy. I couldn't believe what had happened. And when you're young, those things are very shocking. I don't even like to talk about it.
She lived here for the entire decade and later in life volunteered at the Motion Picture Country Home, where a lot of Hollywood actors spend their final days. She visited with all her colleagues and eventually died there herself at age 90 in 1987. The Ojai Apartments became extremely popular among cowboys and actors from westerns. One of them was Kenne Duncan, whose career spanned from the 1920s all the way through the 60s, usually playing like a really mean villain. Director Ed Wood, known for just making terrible movies, but who was played brilliantly by Johnny Depp in Tim Burton's Ed Wood, was a huge fan of Kenne's and cast him in a few movies, and the two became really good friends.
Many questions wish to be answered by those left behind can only be answered by those gone on, those with the all-seeing eyes.
Kenne spent the rest of his life here at the Ojai Apartments, and in February of 1972, turned out the lights for good by mixing a ton of alcohol and a ton of barbiturates and calling it a night. Ed Wood was the executor of Kenne's estate, and Kenne's wake was held at Ed's swimming pool. And I love this so much. Ed had the guests stand on the diving board as they reminisced about Kenne's life. Born to a silent screen couple in 1924, James Kirkwood Jr. lived here while working as an usher down the street at the Chinese Theater. He had a wild life, but went on to become a successful playwright, winning a Tony and Pulitzer for A Chorus Line. I loved The Disaster Artist, and James Franco's Tommy Wiseau lived here, and there's a great scene on the roof where Dave Franco gives Tommy a pep talk, and they mention James Dean, and it's all in front of the Fontenoy apartments that we just saw. James Franco is really into theater and James Dean and all that, so it's quite possible that he knew that Elia Kazan stayed here for a short while in 1941. Moving on to what is called Padre Terrace, a tiny little cul-de-sac where Portuguese-born Brazilian actress, singer, and dancer Carmen Miranda once lived.
The boys, the girls, they all like Carmen. She gives them butterflies, bats are cartoon eyes. She laughs like God, her mind's like a diamond.
She started out as a hat designer and became known for wearing them with really exotic outfits. A star in Brazil, she came to America, conquered Broadway, and had a pretty solid Hollywood film career from the 30s to about 1953. She became the very first Latin American to put her hand and feet prints into the cement at the Chinese Theater, and the first South American to receive a star on the Walk of Fame. Most stars, especially the ones we're going to learn about on this tour, flocked to Beverly Hills once it popped up on the map, and Carmen was no exception. She died there in 1955 at the young age of 46. There is a really fun little view of the top of the Montecito.
Hey, feeling good, like I should. When in dark, I walk around the neighborhood. Feeling blessed, never stressed. that sunshine on my Sunday best.
Alright, first up on Emmett Terrace is this two-bedroom house built in 1922 and home to Phyllis Haver, who was a silent film star up until 1929.
Everything I want, I have. Money, notoriety, and Rivieras. I even think I found God in the flash lobes of the pretty cameras. Pretty cameras, pretty cameras. Am I glamorous? Tell me, am I glamorous? Hello, hello. Can you hear me? I can be a China doll if you wanna see me fall. Though you're so dope, your love is deadly. Tell me life is beautiful. They all think I have it all. I'm nothing without you. All my dreams and all the lights mean nothing without you.
She starred in over 100 movies and became a huge, huge star, working with the greats, hanging with the bests, and like Viola Dana, she modeled for Maybelline. In 1927, though, Phyllis was able to leave her mark in cinema, though pretty much forgotten, by becoming the first actress to play Roxy Hart on film in Chicago.
And my life is sweet like vanilla is. Gold and silver line my heart, but burned into my brain all these stolen images. Stolen images. Can you picture it, babe? That life we could have lived.
In 1929, Phyllis was like, I am done. She married a millionaire and quit Hollywood entirely. They moved to an 11-room penthouse in New York City. She never had kids, got divorced in the mid-70s, and became a recluse in her Connecticut country house and stayed completely out of the limelight until the popular show This Is Your Life wanted to surprise Max Sennett, so they called her and she jumped at the chance.
Who, for example, will ever forget the Max Sennett Bathing Beauties? Another first, as you made motion picture history. And many of these girls went on to stardom.
I started out as a Max Sennett Bathing Beauty at $12 a week.
Now, an important voice out of your past, Mr. Sennett. Whose is it? You gave her her start. She rose to stardom. Phyllis Haver. Oh! Phyllis Haver!
Darling. Well, I haven't seen you in years.
Well, since 32.
Since 32?
That's right.
Well, Phyllis, I'm
Bless
certainly
your
glad
dear heart. It's so lovely to see you.
Well, thank you. My golly.
I don't have to tell you that I owe everything to you for my career.
you don't.
You taught me everything I know about acting.
No, you're a wonderful girl.
Or knew about acting.
You're a wonderful girl.
I haven't acted for a long, long time.
Well, anyway, darling.
Bless you.
Thank you, Phyllis Haver, a great star and a great lady. Thank you.
When Max Sennett died in 1960, Phyllis was so distraught and crushed that she put on her hair, did her makeup, dressed to the nines, and swallowed a bottle of barbiturates.
We were two kids just trying to get out, lived on the dark side of the American dream. We would dance all night, play our music loud. When we grew up, nothing was what it seemed. Hello, hello, can you hear me? I can be a China doll if you like to see me fall.
Right next door in this 1923 house lived another forgotten actress who starred in a film classic original. Jean Parker played Beth alongside Katharine Hepburn in the very first sound production of Little Women. before we move on, across from Phyllis and Jean, you can see the back of Carmen Miranda's house that we saw earlier down on Padre Terrace. Here at the very end of Emmett Terrace in this house live two actors. First up is William Eythe, a hot-tempered, aggressive actor whose career took off pretty strongly in 1942 while he was under contract at Fox.
Life is good. You look around and think I'm in the right neighborhood. But honey, you just moved in. Life is grand, and wouldn't you like to have it go as planned? Go as planned.
Second up is Lon McCallister, also contracted to Fox, and pretty much the opposite of rugged William, with more of a boy-next-door sort of innocent look to him.
Hip hip hooray, hocus pocus. With some magic you can fly through the air. But when you're the guy pulling focus, there are people who will wish you weren't there. Life is good. You look around and think I'm in the right neighborhood. But honey, you just moved in. Life is grand, and wouldn't you like to have it go as planned? Go as planned. Go west, young man, go west. Take a real screen test. Doesn't count as a job well done. The locusts had their day.
The two actors lived in this house together at the same time because they were in a relationship. Now, while it wasn't necessarily public, it was not a secret in Hollywood. Darryl Zanuck, then the head of Fox, absolutely hated it, and the PR team went into overdrive, making sure that the men were never photographed together and were often seen with young up-and-coming actresses.
The news filtered over the transom that a villain ended up with a part. You paid your respects like a ransom to a moment that was doomed from the start.
After their contracts were dropped, the two men bought a house together in Malibu and traveled the world shooting home movies and selling the footage to studios back in Hollywood to use as stock footage. William eventually started producing plays, and I love this. He produced one that put Carol Channing on the map. The two became such good friends that she was with him when he died of hepatitis in 1957 at the young age of 38. Carol remained friends with Lon, who quit show business in 1963 and began a long-term relationship with director George Cukor, who was 24 years his senior. They were inseparable until George died in 1983. After George died, Lon moved to Lake Tahoe and rarely spoke of his Hollywood life. He died in 2005 at the age of 82, and out of all of his obituaries, only one newspaper mentioned that he was gay and that he had had a relationship with William. I hate to brag, but no, I don't. I got to meet Carol Channing once, and I really wish I knew about these guys because it would have been so much fun to bring them up to her.